My presentation directly continues Zoran Janetovic, as I will trace fate of those workers who were recruited in Serbia and who then came to Nuremberg to work here. What do we know about Serbian civilian workers in Germany between 41 and 45? To put it frankly, almost nothing. This might seem unbelievable when we consider how many historians have dealt with this topic and how many works have appeared, especially since the 90s. But still, there are some reasons why the situation is as it is. Fact is that civilian workers from Serbia made up only between 1.5% at the beginning and 0.6% of all civilian foreign workers in the German Reich. In addition, Serbs, like all other workers, were spread throughout the Reich. So there was only a small contingent in each city, municipality, village, or factory. And they were not targeted by any special National Socialist laws or decrees, like, for example, the Poles or the so-called Ostarbeiter. So these are only some of the reasons, of course, why the fate of Serbian civilian workers has hardly had room either in extensive works on the topic of forced labor or in smaller regional or local studies. So with hardly any works to rely on, I accessed this topic from the local perspective. So my goal was to learn as much as possible about the living, the lives and the living conditions here in Germany. And my case study was the city of Nuremberg, with the sources, first and foremost, registration cards that can be found among police files. So when the foreign workers arrived at their destination, they had to report to the police that recorded some of their data. Nevertheless, the first obstacle was to identify all the persons who came from Serbia between 41 and 45. This might seem unusual, but it wasn't, as the terms Yugoslav, Serb, or Croat had been fluent since the destruction of Yugoslavia, and for many German officials, they were probably not common, or better to say, clearly to separate, so that they can only serve as a guide. The workers were classified by their country of origin, so those persons who arrived with transports from Serbia were usually referred to as Serbs. We could So here I will come to this in a moment. So in the forms there is this citizenship, and when persons came from Croatia, here it was written Croatia. For the Serbs, that was not possible because there was no state called Serbia, so they got Yugoslavia. And there was even more, so you could put a former citizenship where I found here always Yugoslav worker or sometimes Serbian worker, so to clarify. So, and then at the last page, this is the last page, there was the last point. You could state the nationality. So this led to the standard sentence that I could find on every form. That is, by descent and mother tongue, I'm a Serbian national. So these persons. So these are the other two pages of the form. Were then classified, were put on the pile that got the stamp Serbia. And sometimes when classification became difficult because it concerned persons who had had another citizenships before, sometimes even without any apparent reason, so that I couldn't trace a reason, the officials classified them under Yugoslavia. So there was another pile with the label Yugoslavia as well, so I went through that as well. So, having overcome all these difficulties, I have identified a group of 160 persons as coming from Serbia, and they form the basis for the statistical data to come. So, I've identified 121 men and 39 women. Most of them were Orthodox, but we have also 1 Protestant, 5 Catholics, and 2 Muslims. Maybe that were the Albanians. I don't know.
Once you see the name.
Yeah. I can tell you the names later. Hallo. Geht's nicht weiter? The oldest worker was born in 1893, that is, he was already 50 when he came to Germany. And the youngest Serbian worker was a 15-year-old girl who had come to Nuremberg together with her mother in July of 43. So it is striking but not surprising that the birth years 19 to 26, hoppala. So this pile here. So the young, mostly single persons made up half of the male workers. For the vast majority, Nuremberg or its surroundings was the first destination in Germany. Only 22 people had previously been in another German city and then transferred here. So that was recorded as here. So here it states he was from the birth to until September 41 in Yugoslavia, and then he came to Nuremberg. And sometimes we have here one more place stating, I don't know, Berlin or whatever, and then he came to Nuremberg. Or even 2 or 3 sometimes, but that is very rare. So the figures confirm the general trend as presented by Zoran only partially. So we have in 41 and 42 each 48 persons that came to Nuremberg, and in 43 the number increased to 60, and then it fell. 44 we have only 3 workers, and 45 not 1. The majority of them was employed in industry. The largest employer here, not only for Serbian workers, was the Siemens Schuckertwerke, that employed 29 male Serbian workers as well as 22 female, followed by Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, that is MAN, with 25 Serbian workers and only 1 female worker. And all the others were distributed among craftsmen or medium-sized companies or even smaller companies. So according to National Socialist ideas, the foreign workers were supposed to do especially auxiliary work. So not surprisingly, most Serbian civilian workers, at least 54 in total, were recruited as unskilled workers, regardless of their occupation in Serbia. For example, at the Siemens Schuckertwerke, of the 29 already mentioned workers, 19 were employed as unskilled workers. Of the 39 women, 1 worked as an interpreter, 1 as chambermaid, and 2 as housemaids. All the others were auxiliary workers in factories. Nevertheless, some Serbs were hired as skilled workers or craftsmen, such as locksmiths, paviors, painters, carpenters, and the like. For example, Arbeitsgemeinschaft Kongresshalle, or short ARGE, that is merger of 3 major construction companies who were building a Kongresshalle, so this building, even advertised in the major Serbian daily newspaper Novo Vreme, looking specifically for qualified personnel. The Reich Ministry of Labor considered such advertisements in Serbia particularly effective. I'm not sure if they were as effective as they thought. In the end, Arge found 17 workers, 5 of whom were employed as skilled workers. And I know that Florian told us that the works had stopped in 39, but now we are in 41 and 42, and I'm not sure what they really did here, but it was this company that had recruited them. From the point of view of German companies and the German Reich, a good worker was the one who worked diligently and who also fulfilled his or her contract, that is, stay for at least 6 or even better for 12 months. And it was best if he or she returned then from Serbia with a new contract. According to statistics, slightly more than half of Serbian workers in Nuremberg fulfilled these expectations. At least 40 people stayed between 6 months and 1 year in Germany, in Nuremberg. Another 38 stayed between 1 and 2 years, and further 12 people worked in Germany for more than 2 years. The remaining 50 people terminated their contracts ahead of schedule, almost half of them in the first month. Either they fled the workplaces or they returned to Serbia because they were not fit for work, so they were not einsatzfähig in the Reich. So you can see that, this is, you can see this really good, right? Well, all returnees received this orange tickets stating the reason for their return. So it was, so we have here, nicht einsatzfähig. So this was the most common reason to return. They either received a ticket to the border, like here it says Marburg, which is Maribor in Slovenia, of course, and not Marburg, the other one. And at the back of the ticket, it stated, Regelzug, Benutzung wird bewilligt. So they could take a normal train. Sometimes they were able to get back with a collective transport to Serbia. But I'm pretty sure that these collective transportations stopped in sometime in 43, because I didn't find any later than 43. As the Serbian workers were generally recruited on a voluntarily basis in cooperation with the Serbian collaborationist government, it has sometimes sent an envoy to visit his co-nationals, so that's what Soran told us as well, and to review their general working and living conditions. On such an occasion, to the MAN in Nuremberg, its management complained that 1/5 of Serbian workers did not provide the required work. However, it can also be concluded that, on the other hand, 4/5 of these workers, who were normally farmers and not used to this work, worked satisfactorily. So German companies also complained about the lack of order and cleanliness of the Serbian workers, as well as their, I quote, urge to gamble. I doubt that these complaints were based on real occurrences en masse, but I assume that they were triggered by general prejudices towards people from Southeastern Europe in general and Serbia in special. When we consult the statistics, there was only one person among the 160 persons that I've reviewed who was actually sentenced to 60 Reichsmark or 12 days imprisonment for, I quote, participating in the prohibited gambling. 3 other persons fell also into the midst of National Socialist justice and were sentenced to prison terms. One was sentenced for stealing and price gouging. In other words, he tried to sell goods on the black market. One served a prison sentence for theft, and another one tried to switch food stamps. In the end, the overall assumption that is that all my examples just try to improve their living conditions and especially the food supply. If caught, they would then face prison sentences like other foreign workers as well. The living conditions of Serbian workers did not differ from those of other foreign civil workers from Western, Southern, or Southeastern Europe. Most of them lived in the barrack camps for foreign workers built by the respective companies of the SS, or the SS. There, the workers were, if possible, separated according to nationalities. There are hardly any documents about those camps in the city of Nuremberg. Alone through the evaluation of the documents on the Serbian civilian workers, I can name 27 camps with 11 other facilities also accommodating foreign workers. So there is however no data on how many such camps existed altogether. But what I've come across is that Nuremberg authorities have had big plans. They had a vision to build large camp villages in each cardinal direction of the city to host all the foreign workers. The example of the SS Camp Fischbach shows how precarious this situation could be. At the beginning of 1943, the SS ceded this camp to the MAN for their foreign workers. But only some of the acquired barracks could be heated. So now the factory, the MAN, was responsible for the heating and the heating material for some 1,600 foreign workers that were in that camp. When the cold season set in, the workers, as one would expect, did not receive enough heating material. In addition, the MAN did not provide a communal kitchen, so the workers got food stamps and had to buy food outside and then to cook it in the camps. But to do that, there weren't no facilities, so they had to to prepare their meals outside. For that, again, they needed wood. What they got was coal. So they collected all the wood they could find, such as from barracks destroyed by air raids, or they tore the boards from the aborts. So the guards complained, the workers complained, and even the supervisors of the company complained, so that MAN finally, in the winter of 1943, established a communal kitchen. Rarely, under special circumstances, Serbian workers were able to escape the camps and were allowed to live in private accommodations. This again underlies the ambiguous position of Serbian workers here. Then to live in private was basically privilege. A total of 28 Serbs, that is 17%, working especially in the small trade at restaurants or as maids, lived privately from the beginning. Additional 8 persons were allowed to leave the camps, and thus probably to improve their living conditions. I will give just one example. The couple of Dragomir and Nadezhda C. They came in October of 1943 to Nuremberg together and worked at Vereinigte Margarinewerke. For Dragomir, who was a locksmith by profession, this was his second round in Germany, and this time he took his wife with him. She got pregnant and gave birth to a child in July 1944. And immediately thereafter, they received the permission to move out of the camp and to settle privately. But then, only 2 weeks later, they left Germany, as with a small child, she wasn't able to work anymore, so she wasn't fit for work. So she got again this orange ticket that allowed her and the baby to get back to Serbia, and he was allowed to accompany her. they disappeared, and he didn't come as well. He didn't return, of course, as well. And if we consider that was in summer of 44, and Nuremberg was already severely destroyed by air raids, and it was clear for the most people that Nazis were losing the war, it is comprehensible that they seized the opportunity and not left and did not return. So the air raids seriously worsened the living conditions of civilian workers and posed an imminent threat to their lives. The Allies started their nightly air raids against Nuremberg rather late in August 42. This had far-reaching consequences for civilian workers. Already during the first air raid, the area of the company MAN was damaged. A year later, air raid alarms and bombardments were part of the everyday life of the Nuremberg population. A Hungarian Jewish survivor of forced labor at Siemens Stuttgart Werke, Agnes Rosa, noted in her diary that from December 44, when she arrived in Nuremberg, air raid alarms were triggered almost every night, so that they could hardly get any sleep, and still they had to work every day. So gradually the city of the Nazi party rallies turned into a pile of rubble and ashes. And this, of course, meant a worsening of the situation for foreign civilian laborers. But on the other hand, they used these air raids also for escape, as the situation got worse and worse. So that in April 44, the criminal police ordered to increase the guarding of certain of the bigger camps during air raid alarms. So no one was allowed to leave. So this meant, of course, that they didn't have any protection. In addition, 17 so-called detection camps for unauthorized migration of foreign workers were built in two rings around Nuremberg. So in the villages that lay on the respective ring, road and station barriers were built, and those workers who had been caught were then taken to detention centers and then were sent back to their place of work, or they were assigned a new job, so they were hindered on leaving. In all, it were 39 Serbian workers, and not a single woman was among them who escaped. The employers would report the missing ones to the police. Sometimes they asked for the fleeing worker to be brought back if caught, and sometimes they didn't. So here is an example of a factory only reporting the flight and stating, "As he was a naughty and lazy guy, we do not care about his return." So to come to an end, what overall conclusions can we derive from data collected in Nuremberg? I would say that the National Socialist State did not consistently place Serbs in a specific category. There are several reasons for this. Of course, they were only a small group, but I don't think that is really that important. But the fact that National Socialist Germany had no vision and no ready-made plan when it attacked Yugoslavia played a more significant role. Before the war, there was the idea of the Southeastern European Supplementary Economic Space, and as long as the war lasted, the future of Serbia was not decided. Its development toward a state was hindered, but still there were no clean plans how it would develop after the war. However, these political considerations apparently did not have the derogatory consequences for the Serbian workers, as for example in the case of the Polish workers. The spiral of violence, which has been turning ever faster in Serbia since the summer of 41, we have heard about it this morning, where the action of the German occupiers more and more resemble those in the Soviet Union, seems, from what I can see in those files, not to have produced an echo in Germany itself. That is, I would argue, one did not surpass the already common stereotypes of primitive, less productive, simple-minded, whatever, Southeast Europeans in general, and with certain gradations between the different ethnic groups according to political loyalties. So that would be all for my